You know, I still owe just a little bit, but I always keep in touch. I'm almost out of debt. You know. Everybody knows listen, things happen. In poker world, as long as you communicate with people, that's all that really matters, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. 2,500.
Six-three offsuit.
Playing High Stakes Duel in the Pokergo studio, featuring Mike Matusow. You can read all about his life in Check Raising the Devil. He's done a lot of stuff. He opts to limp the 9-8 offsuit, playing about 67 big blinds deep effective. Shaun Deeb, he gets in there and battles. He currently has a weight loss bet with Bill Perkins, where he has to get down to 17% body fat in about a year. Good luck with that. He has a 6-3 offsuit, a pretty garbage hand, but he decides to raise it up to 2,500 chips, about 4 big blinds. This is not GTO approved. The only time this is approved with a hand this terrible is if he thinks Mike is going to limp preflop, but then fold a lot to a rather small preflop raise, or if he thinks Mike's just going to be super weak and tight and passive postflop. If that's the case, maybe you can be as aggressive as you'd like preflop. But if Mike is playing good, strong GTO poker, which maybe he is, maybe he isn't, this is probably a little bit too weak. Whatever. Mike makes a very, very standard call with a 9-8. Let's proceed to the flop.
Turning in the bottom pair on a king-high board, which is more than we can say for 9-high.
That's 1,400.
So this was a limp from Matusow and a raise to 2,500 from Deeb with the 6-3 off, as you alluded.
The flop comes king, jack, 3. Shaun Deeb has bottom pair. Terrible kicker. Mike Matusow has 9-high. Zip and pip. Shaun Deeb decides to bet small this hand, which is perfectly reasonable. 1,400 chips. Mike Matusow casually calls. I think that's probably not just a little too loose, but far too loose. Bad backdoor straight draw is not a hand you can continue with. If he had a backdoor flush draw, then sure, I think it's perfectly reasonable to continue against a tiny bet. When you're playing heads up, in position, getting excellent odds, you just can't fold all that often. That said, whenever you do not have overcards to the middle card on the board, you just gotta let it go. But Mike has plans. He gets a little bit devious every once in a while. One thing I've noticed is that the more, let's call them old school players, they usually play kind of tight and aggressive, but then they just sporadically get way out of line when they think they've developed an image such that they can get away with some sicko bluff. Maybe Mike has a desire to make a sicko bluff. Let's find out on the turn.
Bets flop, and note the float from Matusow. Just 9 of diamonds, 8. Quite interesting. 7,800 out there. Excuse me,
I
Ali.
don't recall having seen thus far in the match, Nick.
Check.
The float on the flop from Mike.
The stone float.
Yeah.
Great instincts here from Mike. I mean,
That's 4,100.
He seems a little bit more dialed than at any other point in the match, just by virtue of this here.
well, he said the addies are kicking in, but no, I mean, I agree. He's dialing in. He could smell blood. And also, these slightly shallower navigations are good call from Shaun. 16,000 in the middle. Big one here, Ali.
The turn is the 2 of hearts. Wouldn't Mike Matusow love to have the 9 of hearts instead of the 9 of diamonds right now? Shaun Deeb, I think, has a pretty easy check with his bad third pair. And Mike Matusow does decide to bluff. Roughly half pot. This is a situation where, look, if you're going to be bluffing with this hand and all other floats and all other logical draws, you're probably drastically over bluffing. That said, if Mike thinks he can make Deeb fold out a whole lot of hands like pocket 10s and worse with a turn plus river bet, probably a pretty good strategy, because you have to presume Deeb's going to be betting a lot of hands on the turn like a king. So if he's mostly capped at a jack, then if a jack's the best hand he can have, I actually love the idea of betting the turn and betting the river, especially if you use a kind of big size on the river. That said, Shaun Deeb is a world-class player. He will certainly protect his checking ranges decently well, and for that reason, you have to be careful drastically over-bluffing. You have to be careful drastically over-bluffing against anyone who plays well, and I played with Deeb a little bit. He doesn't particularly like to fold. Mike doesn't care, though. He does go for the half pot. Deeb with the bottom pair, no kicker. Finds a call. I don't really mind it. There are a lot of draws available on the turn that Mike could have, and if he's ever floating the flop with an air ball and then betting the turn, he certainly can't go around folding a pair. Deeb does call. Let's go to the river.
Board pairing jack on the end, and might this be an opportunity for Mike to try to represent? Jack X seems very much like a possibility. As played, no?
It seems Mike agrees with you, indeed. And for Deeb, let's see what he comes with, Ali.
Well, let's see what he's being asked for.
Bet.
7,500 on the milky side.
I like the size. It's a very kind of, I might have a king type size.
We'll bet that hand. Card, Mikey.
The river jack of clubs is terrible for Matusow because now if Deeb did have a king or a jack, he's obviously never folding. And because all the draws missed, this is a spot where Deeb may even call with hands like any pair. And that's not good. That said, I think if you find yourself in Matusow's shoes with the 9 high, you just have to bluff in this spot. So Deeb checks. Matusow goes for 7,500, which is a little bit less than half pot. I think in this spot, you really just want to bet your hand like you would if you had a king. And I have to presume a king is good enough to go for a bigger bet in this scenario. Also, the nice thing about a bigger bet is that that should make your opponent fold out a little bit more often with their marginal bluff catchers, like ace high or like a random 3 or a random 2, which Deeb certainly could have. He's not going to be 3-betting only with good hands pre-flop. So I think Matusow probably should have gone a little bit bigger, but I love the idea of if you do find yourself on the turn, you got to bluff. And if you do find yourself on the river, you know, you probably got to bluff, especially if you have a somewhat tight image. Let's see if Deeb finds the call.
Turn a set of deuces. 2 jack 3 suited.
10 sugar.
Click call, and it's a turning point in the match.
You won. You're slow rolling me. You won.
After a bit of thought, Deeb makes the call, and this may look like the most hero of hero calls you've ever seen. That said, if you think about it from Deeb's point of view, he's getting amazing odds, because he only had to call 7,500 into a pot that's going to go up to 32,000, 31,000, 32, I can't count. Doesn't really matter. 7,500 into 30-something means he can't really fold a whole lot of bluff catchers. And in this spot, notice that he does not have a blocker that interacts with the most likely bluffs that Matusow will have. I gotta presume some of the most likely bluffs in the spot are gonna be a hand containing a queen or a 10, right? So in this scenario, a hand like queen 3 would be a way worse hand to call with than a hand like 6-3. Because Matusow is logically gonna have stuff like queen 10, queen 9, 10-9, stuff like that. So in terms of actual bluff catchers, I think Deeb's hand is certainly reasonable to bluff catch with. So getting good odds with a decent bluff catcher, I don't really hate the call. The only problem here is that every once in a while, Matusow may be going for some weird thin value bet with a hand like pocket 4s, maybe ace 3. I don't think that's going to happen all that often, but you never really know. Sometimes some of the live pros go for really thin value, merged bets, whatever you want to call them. And if that's the case, then the 6-3 call becomes way worse. However, it's actually a pretty good hand to call with.
No, Shaun won't show it.
Good raise. You want to see?
Fair enough. It was a spirited pot there,
Bad read.
Ali.
Really bad read.
800 now in the big blind.
Mike Matusow mucks his hand. He does not want to show that hand. It's a very, very spirited play. And Deeb actually does not have to show his hand, despite the fact that I'm very sure that he's very proud of his call in this situation. That said, do you think he should have shown his hand in this spot? That he raised Matusow with a 6-3 offsuit pre-flop? That he called him down with a bad pair? You think he should have shown him? Take a second, pause the video, and let me know what you would have done and what you think Deeb should have done in the comment section below. This is an interesting one because by showing that you raised him pre-flop with a weak hand and that you called him down with a weak hand, it kind of says two different things, right? The fact that you raised him with a weak hand makes Matusow potentially think that now I should start trapping you way more and just not folding because maybe you're raising me far too wide. But if you think about it, Deeb really wants to be able to raise Matusow far too wide, and drastically over-realize his equity and make Matusow fold before the flop, or perhaps too often on the flop with a lot of aggression. So he doesn't really want that to happen. Also, does he really want Matusow to know that he just called him down very, very wide? I don't know. I don't know. Depends on the dynamic these two players have. But in this scenario, especially when playing heads up, I think you really, really, really do not want to show your hand when it possible at all, unless you think showing your hand is really going to make your opponent go on monster tilt. And I know we've seen Matusow have his classic Mike Matusow blow-ups many, many times on TV, but I don't think he's actually that inclined to go insane in most scenarios, although maybe heads up he would. It's tough to know. You don't know until you try. That's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, click the like and subscribe buttons down below. If you want another fun hand that made Phil Hellmuth furious when he was battling it out for $1.6 million, I have a nice one lined up for you next. Have fun, good luck, and when you hero call on the river with the 6 and the 3, I hope you win the pot.